Like many of you, I'm a British citizen and I live in America, which means I probably represent two of the most unpopular countries at this forum, but I was very pleased to have been admitted nonetheless. So I'm here to talk to you a little bit today about the equation that we were shown earlier. Blockchain plus AI plus human equals magic. But I would contend that there's a missing element in this equation, and that's trust. We heard about it a little bit earlier. The first speaker in the first panel talked about trust in systems and the power that blockchain has to overcome that. But I'm talking about something slightly different. The trust between the public and the private sector to share these technologies and this data if we're going to overcome human challenges. So we know we can solve many of the world's greatest problems with AI. We're going to hear about it a lot today. We're going to hear some great innovations and there's great displays at the back of the room. We also know it makes good commercial sense. But ironically, those with the most acute challenges, those trying to provide education for all, eradicate poverty, provide universal healthcare, have the poorest access to data and information. I'm talking particularly about low-income country governments. It's in those places where we need to try and foster collaboration between the public and the private sector so that they can harness the best technologies and the best data in order to solve human challenges. This is nowhere better demonstrated than thinking about the Sustainable Development Goals that were just highlighted by Tabitha, the big global goals that the world agreed to in 2015. Of the 232 indicators we are meant to use to monitor those goals, half of the data is missing. That means that for most of the countries in the world, half of the data that they need to know whether we're going to eradicate poverty, whether we're going to fix education, isn't there. Now, we have the technology to do this. That's what we're talking about today, but we're not sharing it with the public sector. Ultimately, this is a question about cooperation and trust, or as I like to call it, overcoming everyone's innate human tendency to resist the urge to share things. If anybody figured out that that's an acronym for trust, you get a prize. So trust is the biggest barrier to scaling up these innovations for social good. Companies are worried that governments are not going to respect the contracts they have with their customers or necessarily uphold the same standards in using their data. Governments are worried that the standards that companies are using aren't as the same or equivalent par to official statistics. And so there's this constant sort of tension between sharing information between these two parties. And overcoming this isn't just about building personal relationships. It's about looking at the institutional building blocks along the data value chain, from the identification of the problem, the development of the solution, the analytics, the storage of the data, and creating institutions that are going to foster trust along that value chain so that these parties can collaborate. Excuse me. Fortunately, there is progress happening. SDSN TReNDS, my group, has been working in Colombia with the Colombian government and with their National Statistical Office, as well as with the Bogota Chamber of Commerce, where we've managed to encourage a partnership between the Colombian government and the Chamber of Commerce and the many, many companies that they represent to share a lot of the economic data that they hold on those different companies. Now, this wasn't rocket science, but what it required was sitting down and negotiating two things: a clear legal framework, who owns the data, who controls the data, etc., and a secure data exchange platform. And those are the two elements that we see time and time again in successful stories of data exchange between these two sides. It's the legal frameworks, and it's the data exchange platform. Now, blockchain is the opportunity we have to scale up this kind of secure data exchange, and there's huge potential to do that quickly. On the legal side, we've seen less progress, and I'm excited to announce today that SDSN, working with the World Economic Forum, with NYU's GovLab and many other partners, is launching a new project called Contracts for Data Collaboration, where we're looking at generic legal guidance and legal templates to enable public-private data sharing, which will lower the barriers to entry for many of these low-capacity governments who want to work with companies like your own, but don't have the bandwidth or the legal advice in order to do so. So we know the problem. The problem is that those with the most acute challenges, many of these low-income country governments particularly, who want to tackle some of the most acute human challenges out there, like poverty eradication, don't have the data at their fingertips. We know the solution: better collaboration between all the innovators in this room and different companies around the world with those public entities, and we know how to get there, which is the legal frameworks and secure data exchange platforms. The question is, what are we all going to do in our research and in our companies to take this to scale? And what can we do moving forward in order to make this happen now? So I leave you with that. Thanks very much.